He saved her, when she was a child. Now their swords clash, in a Deathworld arena. The stunning climax unfolds as Jalera reveals her elaborate deception. The arena matches were tests designed to find Elias. Together, they ignite a gladiator uprising, sabotaging the arena's systems and escaping amid chaos, transforming their deathmatch into a revolutionary spark that will ultimately challenge the hegemony's iron grip. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The twin sons of Karis Prime beat down mercilessly through a perpetual heat haze, casting the great arena in an eerie crimson glow. Elias stood in the shadowed preparation chamber, watching dust motes dance in the shaft of light that penetrated from above. The arena's red sand, visible through the still-closed gate, was stained black in patches, the remnants of countless battles, countless deaths. He tightened his grip on the plasma sword, feeling its familiar hum resonate through his calloused palm. The weapon's energy core pulsed with a steady blue light, casting strange shadows across his scarred forearms. 7 years as a mercenary, 5 more as a soldier before that. A dozen wars fought across as many worlds. And now this, fighting for the entertainment of the hegemony's elite. 5 minutes, human scum, sneered the Catherine guard, his feline features twisted in disgust. The guard's ceremonial armor gleamed under the artificial lights, far too pristine for someone who had never seen real combat. Elias didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the best shield. Instead, he closed his eyes, running through his pre-fight ritual. Control your breathing. Feel the weight of your body. Anticipate every movement. But this time, unbidden, a memory surfaced. A child's face, terrified but determined. Silver hair framing crimson eyes, fox-like ears flattened against her head in fear. The acrid smell of smoke and the distant thunder of exploding charges. He remembered pressing her tiny body against his chest as they ran through the burning corridors of the slave compound. "What's your name?" he had asked. "Jalera," she had whispered. 7 years ago, he'd promised to find her family, to make sure she was safe. But the galaxy was vast, and mercenary work took him far from the Catherine homeworlds. Still, he had searched, whenever he could. Rumors, whispers, traces. But never enough. The crowd's roar surged suddenly, pulling him back to the present. The noise was deafening even through the thick stone walls. 30,000 spectators baying for blood. The opposite gate was beginning to grind open, ancient mechanisms groaning under the strain. His opponent was arriving. The announcer's voice boomed across the translation circuits, words streaming in 20 different languages simultaneously. "Citizens of the hegemony, honored guests from the 7 systems, today's match promises spectacle beyond compare." Elias rolled his shoulders, trying to loosen muscles knotted with tension. The plasma sword hummed louder as he activated its secondary circuits. The blade elongated, crackling with energy that could slice through battle armor as easily as flesh. In the East Gate, a human mercenary whose blade has tasted blood on 12 worlds, the survivor of the Keldaran massacres and the Battle of Viridian Prime, the unstoppable, the unbreakable Elias. His gate began to rise, letting in blinding light and the full force of the crowd's frenzy. Elias squinted against the glare, stepping forward with practiced calm. Show no fear. Show no weakness. Those were the rules of survival. And in the West Gate, the newest champion of our arena, undefeated in 27 matches, the princess with blades of vengeance, the silver storm of Catherine Fury, Jalera. Elias froze mid-step. The name hit him like a physical blow. It couldn't be. The galaxy held many Jaleras. It had to be coincidence. But through the steam and haze emerging from the opposite gate, he saw her, taller now. Her adolescent awkwardness transformed into lethal grace. Form-fitting blue armor accentuated her lithe frame. Her silver hair was braided tightly against her skull, exposing the fox-like ears of her Catherine heritage. Twin blades crackled with violet energy in her hands. She dropped into a fighting stance, crimson eyes narrowing, then widening with recognition. "You!" The word was barely audible across the arena, but Elias read it on her lips. His plasma sword trembled in his suddenly unsteady hand. "Jalira?" The announcer's voice cut through their moment of recognition. "What's this? Our two fighters seem to know each other. The betting pools are already adjusting. This is no ordinary match. Citizens." Jalira's expression hardened, lips pulling back to reveal sharp canines. 7 years I've waited for this," she said, voice carrying clearly now across the sand. Elias's heart sank. There was no mistaking the hatred in those crimson eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at him with trust and hope. What had happened to the child he'd saved? What had turned her into this arena champion? The final gong sounded. The match had begun. Jalira moved like lightning, covering the distance between them in a blur of silver and blue. Her twin blades whirled in a deadly arc, forcing Elias to leap backward. Sparks erupted where plasma met plasma, casting bizarre shadows across the red sand. He parried desperately, recognizing immediately that this was no ordinary opponent. Her technique was flawless, each strike flowing seamlessly into the next, giving him no time to counter. All he could do was defend, retreating step by step across the arena floor. Yet, even in the fury of her assault, he saw the tells of the child he'd once known. The slight hesitation on her left side, where she'd been injured during their escape. The golden flecks in her crimson eyes that brightened with each surge of emotion. "Fight back!" she snarled, blade slicing mere centimeters from his throat. Elias spun away, finally finding enough space to launch a counterattack. His blade swept low, then high, testing her defenses. "Jalira, stop this. We don't have to do this." "We have exactly to do this," she spat, meeting his strikes with perfect precision. Their blades locked, faces close enough that he could see the individual lashes framing those haunting eyes. "You left me." The accusation struck deeper than any blade. "I never stopped looking," he said, voice strained with the effort of holding her back. "Then you should have tried harder." She disengaged with a vicious twist, nearly disarming him. The crowd roared its approval, sensing the emotional current underlying the spectacular swordplay. The announcer's voice boomed again. "Unprecedented skill. Unprecedented passion. What history connects our champions?" As they circled each other, Elias was thrown back into memory. The slave compound had been a nightmare of narrow corridors and locked doors, alarms blaring, guards shouting. The child, Jalira, had been so small, so fragile against his chest. "Stay close," he had whispered. "I'll get you out." And he had. Through fire and chaos, he'd carried her to safety, to his waiting ship. He remembered her tear-streaked face as he'd promised, "I'll find your family. I'll make sure you're safe." Then, the separation at the refugee camp. He'd had no choice. The mercenary company was leaving, and civilians couldn't follow. He'd arranged for her care, left credits, promised to return. But when he did return, 3 months later, she was gone. The camp officials had no records. It was as if she'd vanished into the void. In the present, their blades clashed again, sending a cascade of sparks across the sand. The intensity of her attacks had increased, fueled by rage and pain that had festered for 7 years. "You were supposed to come back," she shouted, landing a glancing blow that scorched his shoulder armor. "You promised!" "I did come back," Elias countered, wincing at the pain. "You were gone. I searched for years." Their deadly dance continued, neither gaining the advantage. The betting pools shifted wildly as spectators tried to predict the outcome. In the guard towers overlooking the arena, Security forces tracked their movements with precision weapons, insurance against any fighter who might try to escape. Energy barriers hummed higher around the perimeter, glowing blue against the red sand. Neither of them could exit until this was finished. With a sudden, unexpected move, Elias managed to disarm Jalira of one of her blades. The violet plasma sword spun away, deactivating as it hit the sand. For a brief moment, her mask of fury cracked, revealing a flicker of doubt, and beneath it, pain so raw it took his breath away. The crowd fell momentarily silent, then erupted in chaotic cheering. "Finish her!" some yelled. "Kill the human!" others countered. Elias lowered his blade slightly. "Jalira, listen to me. Whatever happened, whatever you believe, I never abandoned you. I've carried you with me every day for 7 years." Her remaining blade trembled, for a heartbeat. He thought he'd reached her. Then her expression hardened again. "Pretty words from a mercenary," she snarled, retrieving her fallen weapon with a graceful roll. "But words won't save you today." The announcer's voice cut through their exchange. "The final phase begins. No mercy. Only one leaves alive." The gates around the arena rose, revealing additional obstacles, raised platforms, defensive barriers, even primitive projectile weapons mounted on swiveling bases. "Jalira, this is madness," Elias said, blocking her renewed assault. "We don't have to kill each other. There must be another way." "There is," she whispered, so softly that only he could hear. Then, with a move so fast he barely saw it, she spun away from him and slashed at what appeared to be a random access panel in the arena wall. Alarms immediately began to scream. Red warning lights flashed from the guard towers. "Arena breach!" The announcer's voice had lost its theatrical quality, replaced by genuine panic. "Security protocols activated." Vents opened in the walls, hissing as knockout gas began to flood the arena. Spectators scrambled toward exits that were rapidly sealing. Guards poured from hidden doors, weapons drawn. Jalira grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him toward the breach she'd created. "Now we run," she said, eyes gleaming with something that wasn't hatred. Like before, together. Understanding dawned on Elias. This wasn't betrayal. It was something far more complicated. They plunged through the opening into a maintenance corridor beyond. Behind them, chaos engulfed the arena as other fighters, apparently part of Jalira's plan, seized the opportunity to rebel. "Corvin and Zay will lead the others," Jalira explained as they sprinted down the narrow passage. "We have 4 minutes before the hegemony cruiser locks onto the arena." "You planned this," Elias said, amazement replacing confusion. "All of it." A tight smile. 7 years is a long time to plan. She handed him a small device. "Override codes. Security will be on us in 30 seconds. True to her prediction, armed guards appeared at the end of the corridor. Elias input the codes into a nearby terminal, causing blast doors to slam down, cutting off pursuit. They ran through a labyrinth of service tunnels, fighting when necessary, evading when possible. Twice they were nearly captured. Once, Elias took a blaster shot meant for Jalira, the energy bolt searing across his ribs. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a private docking bay. A sleek courier ship waited, engines already humming with pre-flight preparation. "Yours?" Elias asked, clutching his injured side. "Diplomatic immunity has its advantages," Jalira replied, helping him aboard. She took the pilot's seat with practiced ease, fingers dancing across the controls. The ship lifted off, just as security forces burst into the hangar, blaster fire scorching the hull as they ascended. Above the arena complex, a massive hegemony cruiser loomed, weapon systems tracking their small vessel. "They're locking on," Elias warned, checking the tactical display. Jalira's smile was fierce. "Let them try." She sent the ship into a death-defying atmospheric dive, skimming the surface of Karis Prime at speeds that made the hull shriek in protest. The cruiser followed, but its bulk made the sharp maneuvers impossible. "Hold on," Jalira warned, pulling the ship into a canyon so narrow that their wingtips nearly scraped the walls. Elias gripped his seat, knuckles white. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" "The same place I learned to fight," she answered cryptically. "Necessity." The ship burst from the canyon into open air, then immediately plunged into a cloud bank. When they emerged, Jalira activated the jump drive. "That's too close to the atmosphere," Elias protested. "The gravitational—" The stars elongated around them, and reality itself seemed to bend as they hurtled into hyperspace. "Interference could kill us," he finished weakly. Jalira's laugh was surprisingly light. "Physics is more flexible than the Academy teaches." With the immediate danger past, the adrenaline that had kept Elias going began to fade. The blaster wound in his side throbbed mercilessly. Darkness encroached on the edges of his vision. "You're bleeding," Jalira said, alarm replacing triumph. She engaged the autopilot and moved to his side. "It's nothing," he tried to assure her, but the words slurred. He slumped forward, consciousness slipping away. The last thing he felt was Jalira's strong arms catching him, lowering him gently to the deck. The last thing he heard was her voice, no longer filled with hatred, but with fear. "Don't you dare die on me. Not when I just found you again." Then darkness claimed him completely. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of reality between periods of blackness. The cool touch of medical equipment against his skin, the hum of the ship's engines, Jalira's voice, sometimes giving commands to the ship's AI, sometimes speaking softly to him, though he couldn't make out the words. When he finally awoke fully, he found himself in the ship's small medical bay. Synthetic skin patches covered his wounded side, the advanced healing compounds already knitting his flesh back together. An IV line delivered fluids and pain suppressants to his bloodstream. Jalira sat beside him, her silver hair loose now around her shoulders, making her look younger, closer to the child he remembered. She wore simple black clothing instead of the arena armor, and her eyes were focused on a datapad in her lap. "How long?" Elias asked, his voice rough from disuse. She looked up, relief washing over her features before she mastered her expression. 3 days. The wound was worse than it looked, the blaster bolt fragmented on impact. Elias tried to sit up, wincing at the pull of healing tissue. "Where are we?" "Hyperspace. Still, we're taking a circuitous route to avoid hegemony patrols." She set aside the datapad. "You should rest more." "I've rested enough." He studied her face, searching for the hatred he'd seen in the arena, but finding only carefully controlled neutrality. "Why, Jalira? Why the elaborate setup? If you wanted me dead, there are simpler ways." She was silent for a long moment, eyes dropping to her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft he had to strain to hear it. "I didn't want you dead, I wanted answers." "You could have just found me and asked—" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Found you? Do you have any idea how hard I tried? For years. I searched. Mercenary guilds don't exactly keep public records of their members." Elias absorbed this. "So the arena was my best chance to find you. The great arena draws fighters from across the galaxy. I knew that sooner or later you would appear. You became champion just to lure me in?" Jalira's lips curved in a humorless smile. "I became champion because I needed to control the matches. As arena master, I could test each human fighter, assess their skills, their history." Elias stared at her, stunned. "Arena master? But that's—" "Vorak was a figurehead. I've run the arena for 3 years." The implications staggered him. "You've been searching for me for 3 years?" Her expression hardened. "I've been searching for you for 7. The first 3 years. I was looking for my rescuer, my hero." The words turned bitter on her tongue. "The last 3. I was looking for the man who abandoned me." I didn't abandon you, Elias said, the old guilt welling up. When I returned to the refugee camp, you were gone. The officials had no record of where you'd been sent. Because there were no records to find, Jalira said. Ambassador Kelt recognized me at the camp. He knew exactly who I was, the lost princess of the Catherine royal house. But instead of returning me to my family, he saw an opportunity. Opportunity for what? Political leverage. My father, the High Sovereign, had refused to grant the hegemony mining rights on our home moon. With me as a hostage, though they never called it that, they gained significant concessions. Elias felt sick. They used you as a political pawn. For 4 years, she confirmed. Until my father died, and my uncle took the throne. He was more amenable to hegemony demands. I became redundant, a potential embarrassment. That's when they sent me to the arena. To die, Elias said, understanding dawning. They underestimated me. The fierce pride in her voice was unmistakable. I survived. I excelled. I began to gain influence. And all the while, I looked for you. Why me, after everything you'd been through? Jalira stood abruptly, pacing the small confines of the medical bay. Because you were the only one who ever helped me without wanting something in return. Because for years, the memory of your promise was all that kept me going. She stopped, fixing him with those crimson eyes. And because when that memory wasn't enough anymore, hatred for you was the next best fuel. The raw honesty of her words struck him like a physical blow. I'm sorry, Jalira. I failed you. Yes, she agreed. You did. Then her expression softened slightly. But perhaps not in the way I thought. They were interrupted by a chime from the ship's communication system. Jalira moved to the console, checking the incoming message. Corvin and Z made it out with 14 others, she reported. They've scattered to the outer colonies, as planned. The hegemony is in chaos. Half the Royal Council has been implicated in the arena scandal. You're doing? A satisfied smile. Evidence has a way of finding the right channels when properly directed. Elias watched her. This incredible woman who had risen from traumatized child to revolution architect. What happens now? Now we disappear, Jalira said. There's a human-friendly colony at the galactic fringe. Haven's Reach. We should be safe there while we decide our next move. Our? Her eyes met his, vulnerability finally showing through her carefully constructed armor. Unless you have other plans. No, Elias said softly. No other plans. Something shifted between them in that moment. A reconciliation, not yet complete, but begun. The hatred that had fueled Jalira for years was giving way to something more complicated. The guilt that had haunted Elias was not absolved, but perhaps it could be channeled into purpose. In the ship's small medical bay, hurtling through the void between stars, they began the slow process of rediscovering each other, not as rescuer and child, not as gladiators forced to fight, but as equals with a shared past and, possibly, a shared future. 3 months later, Elias stood on the porch of their prefabricated cabin, watching Haven's Reach's twin suns sink toward the horizon. The settlement sprawled below them, a collection of simple structures housing refugees from a dozen worlds. In the central clearing, children and young adults trained with practice swords under Jalira's watchful eye. Her teaching style was demanding but kind, so different from the brutal training she herself had endured. She moved among her students with grace, correcting a stance here, demonstrating a parry there. Silver hair caught the fading sunlight, creating a halo effect that made her seem almost ethereal. Elias smiled, remembering how skeptical the colony's leaders had been when they'd offered to teach defensive arts to the settlers. Haven's Reach had no standing army, no formal protection beyond a few outdated perimeter cannons. The idea of training civilians had seemed radical. But then, The first hegemony scout ship had appeared in orbit, and the value of their lessons became immediately apparent. The intruder hadn't stayed long, just enough time to scan the settlement before retreating. But it was a reminder that their safety was fragile, their peace temporary. Jalira dismissed her students as darkness fell, sending them home with additional exercises to practice. She climbed the hill to their cabin, brushing dust from her simple training clothes. "Revan is showing real promise," she said, accepting the water Elias offered. "And the Traxian twins have finally mastered the third form." "Good," Elias said. "We'll need everyone ready when the hegemony returns in force." Jalira nodded, her expression sobering. "The latest transmission from Corvin indicates increased patrol activity in the neighboring sectors. They're still looking for us." "Let them look." Elias put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "We've faced worse odds." The familiar weight of her against him still felt like a miracle. Their relationship had evolved cautiously over the past months, each of them carrying scars, both physical and emotional. The child he had rescued was gone forever, replaced by this complex, powerful woman. The mercenary she had hated had been forced to confront his failings and find a new purpose. Love had come slowly, tentatively, first acknowledged in the quiet darkness of hyperspace, then strengthened through shared purpose and mutual respect. Now it was the foundation upon which they built their new life. Inside their cabin, a communication console chimed with an incoming message. Jalira moved to answer it, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the holographic display. "Zuh," she greeted the young Traxian, whose image hovered above the console. "What news?" "Good and bad, Princess." Z's translators converted his native clicks and whistles into standardized galactic common. "The Arena Rebellion has sparked something larger. 3 hegemony outposts have declared independence in the past week." Elias joined them at the console. "And the bad news? Ambassador Kelt has been appointed Special Inquisitor. He's been given command of the 7th Fleet with orders to crush the rebellion by any means necessary." Jalira's jaw tightened. "Kelt is a coward and a manipulator. He won't risk direct confrontation unless forced." "Perhaps," Z agreed. "But his first target has already been announced. He intends to make an example of Haven's Reach." Elias and Jalira exchanged grim looks. They had known this day might come, had prepared for it as best they could. "How long do we have?" Elias asked. 3 weeks, standard time, perhaps less." "Understood. Continue with the established plan. We'll be ready." Jalira ended the transmission, her expression resolute. 3 weeks to prepare a settlement of farmers and traders to withstand a hegemony fleet, Elias mused. "Not the worst odds we've faced." "Not by far," Jalira agreed. She moved to a secure cabinet, entering a complex code that caused the door to hiss open. Inside lay their arena weapons, her twin violet blades and his blue plasma sword, untouched since their escape. "I thought we might have more time before needing these again," she said, running a finger along the deactivated hilt of her sword. "We always knew this was temporary," Elias reminded her. "Peace isn't something you find, it's something you make." Jalira nodded, a new determination hardening her features. "Then we'll make it, one battle at a time if necessary." Outside, the final light of the twin suns faded, plunging Haven's Reach into darkness, broken only by scattered settlement lights. In the command center of the hegemony flagship, light years distant, Ambassador Kelt plotted his revenge. Across the galaxy, the spark of rebellion they had ignited continued to spread. Elias activated his communication implant, sending a prearranged signal to their allies scattered across the outer colonies. A single message, repeated and amplified as it spread from world to world. "We're free." In the darkness of their cabin, Jalira's hand found his. Whatever came next, whatever battles awaited, they would face it together. Not as rescuer and rescued, not as opponents forced to fight, but as equals who had chosen each other, despite everything the galaxy had thrown between them. The orphan princess, and the mercenary who had saved her, then lost her, then found her again. Their story, like the rebellion they had sparked, was just beginning. The summons came at dawn, 3 days later. Elias and Jalira were already awake, reviewing defense plans with the settlement's council, when the perimeter alarm sounded. "Single ship," reported Merrick, the colony's sensor operator. "Small profile, minimal armaments, requesting permission to land." "Identification?" Jalira asked, instantly alert. "Catherine Registry. Diplomatic codes." Merrick looked up, confusion evident. "They're broadcasting your royal seal. Princess." Elias saw Jalira stiffen. Her royal heritage was something she rarely acknowledged, a past life that held painful memories. "It could be a trap," he warned quietly. "Almost certainly," she agreed. "But Catherine diplomatic vessels have specific security protocols. If the codes are authentic—" "They appear to be," Merrick confirmed. Jalira made her decision. "Allow them to land at the outer pad. Full security protocol." The settlement's defense volunteers, 30 settlers trained by Elias and Jalira over the past months, moved into position, surrounding the landing pad with weapons drawn. Not the most impressive welcoming committee, but they made up for their lack of military precision with determination. The ship that descended was indeed Catherine, sleek, with the distinctive swept-back wings and pearl-white hull that characterized their royal vessels. It settled on the pad with barely a whisper of sound, advanced gravitational stabilizers negating any dust cloud. "Stay back," Jalira instructed Elias as the boarding ramp extended. He ignored her, moving to stand at her side, plasma sword ready but not yet activated. Not a chance. The figure that emerged from the ship was tall, regal, and unmistakably Catherine. Silver hair, similar to Jalira's, but streaked with age, was elaborately braided around a ceremonial crown. His crimson eyes, so like Jalira's, surveyed the armed settlers with mild interest. "Granduncle," Jalira said, her voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." The Catherine Royal inclined his head slightly. "Niece, may we speak privately? I come with information vital to your settlement's survival." Elias felt, rather than saw, Jalira's tension. This was Sovereign Kirtal, the uncle who had taken the throne after her father's death, the one who had been amenable to hegemony demands. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my people," Jalira responded coldly. "And my consort." The term sent an unexpected warmth through Elias. Despite the tense situation, it was the first time she had publicly acknowledged their relationship. Kirtal's gaze shifted to Elias, assessing. "The human mercenary. Your rescuer. I'm told." He smiled thinly. "How fitting that you found each other again." "You didn't come all this way for a family reunion," Jalira said, cutting through his pleasantries. "State your business." The Sovereign's ears flattened slightly, a sign of irritation in Catherine's. "Direct as always, niece." "Very well. The hegemony fleet approaches, led by Ambassador Kelt. Their official mission is to quell rebellion, but their true purpose is far more sinister." "We're aware of the fleet," Elias said. "But are you aware that they carry the Red Death?" Kirtal asked quietly. A murmur ran through the assembled settlers. The Red Death was a biological weapon, banned by every civilized world for centuries. Its effects were horrific, liquefying organs while keeping the nervous system intact, so victims remained conscious throughout their demise. "That's impossible," Jalira said, but Elias could hear the doubt in her voice. "Even the hegemony wouldn't dare." "They would if they believed they could blame it on rogue elements," Kirtal countered. "Kelt intends to deploy it here, then claims separatist terrorists were responsible. The resulting fear would crush the rebellion before it truly begins." Elias and Jalira exchanged glances. The plan was monstrous, but entirely consistent with Kelt's methods. Why are you telling us this? Elias asked, suspicion evident. You've been a hegemony ally for years. Kirtal's regal posture sagged slightly. An alliance of necessity, not choice. The hegemony held economic stranglehold over our worlds. But this, genocide, crosses a line I cannot accept. He turned to Jalira. Your father would never have permitted such atrocity. I have tried to rule as he would have wished, despite appearances to the contrary. Jalira's expression remained skeptical. Even if what you say is true, Haven's Reach cannot withstand a full hegemony fleet, with or without biological weapons. No, Kirtal agreed. But you won't have to. He produced a small data crystal, offering it to Jalira. Security codes, fleet positions, patrol schedules, everything you need to infiltrate Kelt's flagship and stop this before it begins. Jalira took the crystal, suspicion warring with hope in her expression. This is treason against the hegemony. It is loyalty to something more important, Kirtal corrected. To the Catherine people. To all people. He straightened, regality returning to his bearing. I must return before my absence is noted. The hegemony still believes I am their loyal servant. And aren't you? Jalira challenged. I am loyal to the Catherine throne, Kirtal said simply. A throne that rightfully belongs to you, Princess Jalira. With that bombshell delivered, he returned to his ship, leaving Jalira staring after him in shock. Can we trust him? Elias asked quietly, as the diplomatic vessel lifted off. Jalira clutched the data crystal, expression troubled. I don't know. He was always the political one, father's shrewd advisor. I never knew where his true loyalties lay. Then we proceed carefully. Elias decided. Verify what we can of the intelligence. Prepare for the worst. Jalira nodded, her tactical mind already working through the possibilities. If Kelt truly has the Red Death, we have no choice but to intercept the fleet before it reaches Haven's Reach. We'll need a ship, Elias said. A team. And a miracle, Jalira added grimly. That evening, they gathered their most trusted allies in the settlement's command center. Corvin had arrived from the outer colonies, bringing 3 more veteran fighters with him. Z joined via secure holographic link from his position, infiltrating a hegemony communications hub. 4 of Jalira's most promising students rounded out the group. The plan is simple, Elias explained, displaying the hegemony fleet configuration extracted from Kirtal's data crystal. We intercept the flagship here, in the Varshan Nebula, where sensor interference will give us the best chance of approach. The security codes, if legitimate, will get us into the docking bay. Jalira continued. From there, we split into 3 teams. Team 1 secures our exit. Team 2 creates a diversion in the engineering section. Team 3, Elias and myself, locates and neutralizes the biological weapon. And Ambassador Kelt? Asked Corvin, the Catherine veteran's scarred face grim. Jalira's expression hardened. Is mine? The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation. The data crystal contained far more than just security codes. It held detailed schematics of the flagship, crew rotations, even Kelt's personal schedule. If it was a trap, it was an elaborate one. They requisitioned the settlement's fastest ship, a modified courier, similar to the one they'd escaped Karis Prime in. Weapons were distributed, plans memorized, contingencies established. Throughout the preparations, Elias watched Jalira closely. The revelation that her uncle considered her the rightful sovereign had unsettled her more than she admitted. Her Catherine heritage, the royal responsibilities she had been raised to shoulder, was a part of herself she had tried to leave behind. On the final night before their departure, he found her on the ship's observation deck, staring at the stars. Her silver hair was loose around her shoulders, and she had changed from her practical combat gear into a simple white shift that reminded him painfully of the child she had once been. "Second thoughts?" he asked quietly, moving to stand beside her. "A million of them," she admitted. But not about the mission. About the throne, he guessed. She nodded, not looking at him. I never wanted it. Even before. Everything. I was the spare heir, never meant to rule. My brother was being groomed for sovereignty. Your brother? Killed in the same raid where you found me. The slavers attacked our diplomatic convoy specifically to capture Catherine royalty. Her voice was distant, remembering. When Kirtal took the throne, I was relieved. The burden had passed to someone else. And now? Jalira finally turned to him, her crimson eyes troubled. Now I wonder if my relief was really just cowardice. If I abandoned my people as surely as I thought you had abandoned me. Elias took her hand, feeling the strength in her fingers as they curled around his. You were a child, Jalira. No one could expect you to bear such a burden. I'm not a child anymore, she said softly. And expectations have never dictated my actions. There was a question in her eyes that he understood, without her having to voice it. If she claimed the throne, if she became sovereign of the Catherine people, what would that mean for them? Whatever you decide, Elias said, bringing her hand to his lips. I'll be there, consort, protector, or simply the human who loves you. My place is at your side, in whatever capacity you need. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Even if it means trading our quiet life for royal politics? Even then, he promised. Though I suspect any court with you as sovereign would be anything but traditional. Her laugh, rare and precious, eased the weight of the moment. True, I might instigate a few reforms. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars that would soon guide them to their confrontation with the hegemony fleet. Tomorrow would bring danger, possibly death, but tonight was theirs. I love you, Jalira said suddenly, the words still new enough between them to carry weight. Not the mercenary who saved me, not the gladiator I fought, but the man you are now, the man who came back, again and again, even when I pushed you away. Elias turned to her, cupping her face in his calloused hands. And I love you, not the child I rescued or the princess of legend, but the warrior who forged herself from pain into something magnificent. Their kiss was gentle at first, then fierce with the passion of those who knew tomorrow was uncertain. In the quiet of the ship, with Haven's Reach glowing beneath them and the infinite stars above, they found temporary sanctuary from the coming storm. Dawn brought final preparations, last-minute adjustments to plans. By mid-morning, their small strike force was ready. Jalira addressed them briefly before departure, her voice steady, her bearing regal despite her practical combat armor. The princess and the warrior, perfectly balanced. What we do today, we do not just for Haven's Reach, but for every world crushed under hegemony control. If we succeed, we light a beacon that others will follow. If we fail, she paused, looking at each face in turn. If we fail, we do so, knowing we stood against tyranny when others bowed. They boarded the ship in silence, each carrying their own thoughts, their own reasons for this desperate mission. As the settlement fell away beneath them and the stars opened up before them, Elias took his place at Jalira's side in the command center. Ready? He asked softly. Her smile was fierce, determined. 7 years ago, you saved me. Today, we save everyone. The ship leapt forward, accelerating toward the jump point that would take them to the Vartian Nebula and their destiny. The Vartian Nebula sprawled across 3 light-years, a vast cloud of dust and gas illuminated from within by newborn stars. Its electromagnetic properties played havoc with sensors, making it a favorite route for smugglers and others wishing to avoid hegemony patrols. It was here, according to Kirtal's intelligence, that Ambassador Kelt's flagship would pass, the massive vessel leading a fleet of 12 warships toward Haven's Reach. Their smaller ship dropped out of hyperspace at the nebula's edge, immediately engaging stealth systems that, while not rendering them invisible, would at least confuse enemy sensors. Passive scans only, Jalira instructed, as they eased into the swirling clouds of cosmic dust. Full emission control. The command center was hushed, tense with anticipation. For 2 hours, they drifted deeper into the nebula, following the projected course of the hegemony fleet. Visibility dropped to near zero as the multi-hued gases enveloped their vessel, reducing their viewports to swirling kaleidoscopes of color. "Contact," reported Corvin from the sensor station. "Multiple signatures, bearing 347. "Configuration?" Elias asked. "Consistent with hegemony warships. Flagship in the lead position." Corvin's scarred face was illuminated by the blue glow of his console. "They're running with full shields but minimal weapons charge. They don't expect trouble here." Jalira nodded. Satisfaction evident. This part of Kirtal's intelligence, at least, had proven accurate. "Intercept course. Maintain stealth protocol until we're within docking range." Their ship altered course, slipping through the nebula on a trajectory that would bring them alongside the massive hegemony flagship. On the tactical display, the enemy vessels appeared as ominous red silhouettes, dwarfing their own small craft. "This is insanity," muttered one of the younger fighters, a Traxian, barely out of adolescence. "Yes," agreed Corvin with a grim smile, "but the best plans usually are." As they closed on the flagship, tension mounted. Every instinct screamed that they should be detected, that alarms should be sounding across the hegemony fleet. But the nebula's interference, combined with their stealth systems, kept them hidden. "Docking range in 3 minutes," Jalira announced. "Prepare authentication codes." Elias moved to the communication station, inputting the complex security sequence Kirtal had provided. If the codes were false or outdated, they would be vaporized within seconds of transmission. "Ready," he confirmed, finger poised above the send command. Jalira met his eyes across the command center. In that moment, everything between them, their shared past, their hard-won present, their uncertain future, condensed into a single look of absolute trust. "Send," she ordered. Elias transmitted the codes, and the command center fell silent. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. "Receiving automated response," he reported, hardly daring to breathe. "Docking authorization. Granted." A collective exhalation of relief rippled through the command center. "They think we're a supply vessel," Elias explained, reading the incoming data. "We're being directed to Auxiliary Bay 7. "Perfect," Jalira said. The auxiliary bays were less monitored, used primarily for routine deliveries rather than personnel transport. "Corvin, take us in. Everyone else, final equipment check. We move in exactly 10 minutes." Their ship glided toward the behemoth flagship, now visible through the thinning nebula gases as a vast silhouette against the stars. As they approached, its true scale became apparent. The warship was nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. The auxiliary docking bay opened like a monstrous maw, swallowing their small vessel into its cavernous interior. Automated systems guided them to a berth. Magnetic clamps securing the ship as atmosphere cycled into the bay. "Bioscanners active," warned Z from his station. "They'll detect non-hegemony lifeforms if we pass through the main checkpoints." "We won't be using the main checkpoints," Jalira assured him, activating a schematic of the flagship's interior. "Maintenance tunnels here, and here will get us to our objectives without passing through security." The team gathered for a final briefing, checking weapons and communication devices. Each fighter carried a plasma blade and a compact blaster, except for Jalira and Elias, who wore their arena weapons openly. The sight of Jalira's twin violet blades and Elias's blue plasma sword would strike fear into any who recognized the infamous arena champions. "Team 1, secure our exit and the ship," Jalira reminded. "Team 2, engineering section diversion on my signal." Team 3 with me to locate the bioweapon. Questions? There were none. Each understood their role, the risks, the consequence of failure. Then we move, Elias said, and may whatever gods you believe in watch over you. They exited their ship through the cargo hatch, emerging into the massive docking bay, where automated loaders and maintenance droids moved about their programmed tasks. Using the cover of supply crates and parked shuttles, they made their way to a maintenance access panel near the bay's far wall. The youngest but most technically adept, made quick work of the security locks. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel bathed in emergency lighting. Communications check every 15 minutes, Jalira instructed, as the teams prepared to separate. Radio silence, otherwise unless emergency. Team 1 remained to secure their escape route. Teams 2 and 3 entered the maintenance tunnel, moving swiftly through the flagship's hidden circulatory system. At the first junction, they parted ways, Team 2 heading toward engineering, Team 3 toward the secure research section where, according to Kirtal's intelligence, the biological weapon was being prepared. Elias and Jalira moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other at intersections, communicating with hand signals when necessary. Their years as fighters, both together and apart, had given them an intuitive understanding of each other's movements. They encountered their first hegemony personnel 3 levels up, a pair of maintenance techs who had the misfortune to be inspecting the very tunnel junction Elias and Jalira needed to pass through. The techs never even saw what hit them. Jalira's practice with pressure points ensured they would wake hours later with headaches, but no lasting damage. "Security patrol ahead," Elias warned, checking the motion sensor on his wrist. 4 signatures. Jalira pointed to an overhead vent. "Alternate route." They climbed into the ventilation system, crawling through dust-clogged passages barely wide enough for their shoulders. Below them, the security patrol passed. 4 armored guards with heavy weapons, far more firepower than maintenance tunnels typically warranted. "They've increased security," Jalira whispered once the patrol was gone. "Kirtal's intelligence may be slightly outdated." "Or they know we're coming," Elias replied, voicing the fear they both harbored. They pressed on, dropping back into the maintenance tunnel once the patrol was clear. 2 more levels, 3 more junctions, and they reached the access point nearest to the research section. "Team 2 in position," came Corvin's voice over their secure channel. "Awaiting signal." "Acknowledged," Jalira responded. "Stand by." The door before them was different from the others they had passed. Reinforced, with multiple security measures including a retinal scanner and a DNA reader. "Kirtal's codes won't get us through this," Elias said, examining the security panel. Jalira produced a small device from her belt, a universal bypass module of questionable legality. "Good thing we didn't rely solely on my uncle." She attached the device to the security panel. For agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then the panel flashed green, and the heavy door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Beyond lay not another maintenance tunnel, but a sterile white corridor, clearly part of the research section. The contrast was jarring, from the grimy, utilitarian spaces they had traversed to this pristine, brightly lit hallway. "Labs should be through there," Elias said, consulting the schematic on his wrist device. "Central containment area is our target." "Team 2, Jalira spoke into her communicator. "Execute." Somewhere distant, they felt, rather than heard, a rumble as Team 2 created their diversion in the engineering section. Almost immediately, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. "Emergency in Engineering Section Delta," announced an automated voice over the ship's communication system. "All security personnel report to containment positions." They moved quickly down the white corridor, passing laboratories where startled scientists looked up from their work as alarms blared. None tried to stop the 2 armed intruders, research personnel, not soldiers. The central containment area loomed ahead, a circular chamber with transparent walls revealing multiple levels of security inside. At its center, On a pedestal surrounded by energy fields, sat a simple metallic cylinder, no larger than Elias's forearm. "The Red Death," Jalira breathed, recognizing the containment protocols specific to biological weapons. "Halt!" The command came from behind them as a security team rounded the corner, weapons raised. "Drop your weapons!" Elias and Jalira exchanged a glance, a lifetime of understanding in a single look. Then they moved. Jalira's twin blades activated with a violet flare as she spun toward the security team. Elias's blue plasma sword hummed to life as he charged the containment chamber. The security team opened fire, energy bolts sizzling through the air. Jalira deflected the blasts with her blades, the plasma weapons absorbing energy rather than reflecting it. She moved like liquid lightning, closing the distance to the security team before they could adjust their aim. Elias, meanwhile, plunged his blade into the containment chamber's control panel. Systems shorted out in cascading failure, energy fields flickering and dying. Alarms screamed at new pitch as the chamber's automated defenses detected the breach. Behind him, the sounds of combat told him Jalira was holding her own against the security team. He reached through the disabled energy fields, grasping the cylinder with his gloved hand. It was surprisingly heavy, dense with whatever horrors the hegemony had engineered. "Elias!" Jalira's warning came just in time. He ducked as energy bolts sizzled overhead, fired by a second security team entering from another corridor. Tucking the cylinder under his arm, he activated his blade again, deflecting bolts as he backed toward Jalira. They found themselves surrounded, security teams closing in from both directions. Jalira had dispatched the first group, but more kept coming. "Plan B?" Elias asked, back to back with Jalira as they fended off attacks. "Working on it," she replied, her blades weaving a defensive pattern that kept the security teams at bay. "The ventilation shaft? Too small for both of us in the cylinder." "Damn it!" Jalira's mind raced through options, each less viable than the last. "We need a distraction." As if in answer to her unspoken prayer, a new alarm sounded, different from the engineering emergency or the containment breach. "Intruder alert in command section," announced the automated system. "Repeat, intruder alert in command section. All personnel implement Protocol Omega." The security teams hesitated, clearly torn between capturing the intruders before them and responding to the new threat. "Team 3, came Corvin's voice over their communicators. "Additional diversion created. Path to extraction point 4 is clear. Repeat, extraction point 4 is clear." "Acknowledged," Jalira responded. "Moving now." Taking advantage of the security team's momentary distraction, they burst into action, not toward the way they had come, but toward a side corridor that, according to their schematic, would lead to an emergency evacuation route. Energy bolts followed them, scoring hits on walls and ceiling as they ran. One caught Elias in the shoulder, spinning him halfway around. He staggered but kept moving, the cylinder clutched tightly against his chest. They reached the evacuation route, a narrow passage ending in escape pods designed for emergencies. But as they approached, a blast door began to descend, threatening to cut off their escape. "Go!" Elias shouted, shoving the cylinder into Jalira's hands and using both of his to brace the descending door. "Take it and go!" "Not without you," she snapped, wedging one of her deactivated blade hilts under the door to help hold it open. With her free hand, she dragged Elias through the narrowing gap. They tumbled together onto the other side, just as the blade hilt shattered under the door's weight. The massive barrier slammed down with finality, sealing them off from their pursuers, temporarily. "Extraction point 4, Elias gasped, clutching his wounded shoulder. "Where the hell is that from here?" Jalira consulted her wrist device. 2 levels down. There's a maintenance shaft that should take us directly to Auxiliary Bay 3. Not 7, where our ship is. Change of plans, she explained, helping him to his feet. Corvin moved our ship after the alarm started. Bay 7 was locked down. They found the maintenance shaft, little more than a vertical tube with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. Descending was awkward with Elias's injured shoulder and the cylinder they had to protect. But they managed, emerging into another service corridor 2 levels below. "Almost there," Jalira encouraged as they jogged toward Auxiliary Bay 3. "Just a little further." They rounded a corner and froze. Before them stood Ambassador Kelt, flanked by 6 elite hegemony guards. The ambassador was much as Jalira remembered: tall, thin, with the pale blue skin and elaborate facial ridges of his species. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the corridor lights, and his thin lips curved in a smile that never reached his eyes. "Princess Jalira," he said, voice dripping with false cordiality. "And her human pet. How delightful that you could join us. I see you found my little package." Jalira's blades hummed to life in her hands. "This ends here, Kelt." "Indeed it does." The ambassador's smile widened. "Though not in the way you imagine." He gestured, and the guards raised their weapons, not the standard energy rifles of security teams, but specialized sonic disruptors that could incapacitate without damaging the cylinder. "You never intended to deploy the Red Death, did you?" Elias realized suddenly. "This was all a trap." "Deploy it?" Kelt laughed, the sound hollow and artificial. "My dear human, do you take me for a monster? The cylinder contains nothing but harmless nutrient solution. Its only purpose was to lure you here." "Why?" Jalira demanded, though she was beginning to understand. "What do you gain by capturing us?" "Capturing you? No. Princess. The plan was never to capture you." Kelt's expression hardened. "The plan was to eliminate you, the last true heir to the Catherine throne, and the human who helped spark this inconvenient rebellion." "My uncle," Jalira said, the final piece falling into place. "He set us up." "Sovereign Kirtal is a pragmatist," Kelt confirmed. "He understands that his position, and indeed, the survival of the Catherine people, depends on maintaining good relations with the hegemony. Your continued existence threatens that balance." Elias and Jalira exchanged glances. They were outnumbered, cornered, betrayed. But they had faced worse odds. "You know what's funny, Kelt?" Elias said conversationally, shifting his weight subtly to a fighting stance. "You think you're so clever, but you've made one critical mistake." "Oh," the ambassador raised an eyebrow ridge. "And what might that be?" "You assumed we came alone." The maintenance hatch above Kelt's head exploded outward, and Corvin dropped into the corridor behind the ambassador, plasma rifle already firing. The guards turned in confusion, giving Elias and Jalira the opening they needed. They moved as one, blades flashing in deadly synchronization. 3 guards fell before they could bring their weapons to bear. Kelt scrambled backward, dignity forgotten in his panic. "Kill them!" he shrieked. "Kill them all!" The remaining guards regrouped, forming a protective circle around the ambassador. Sonic disruptors whined as they powered up. Corvin tossed Jalira a small device, a shield generator. She activated it just as the disruptors fired, the energy field absorbing the worst of the sonic attack. Even so, the force drove them back several steps, ears ringing painfully. "The bay is just ahead," Corvin shouted over the cacophony. "Ships prepped for immediate departure." They fought their way forward, step by painful step. Elias took another hit to his already wounded shoulder, the pain nearly driving him to his knees. Jalira caught him, her strength keeping him upright as they pushed toward escape. The guards fell back, forming a final defensive line before the bay entrance. Beyond them, through the transparent bay doors, they could see their ship, engines glowing blue with pre-launch preparation. "Surrender, Princess," Kelt called, his earlier panic replaced by cold calculation. "You cannot win this. Even if you escape me now, the hegemony will hunt you to the edges of the galaxy." "Let them try," Jalira replied, violet blades humming with deadly purpose. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The guards fired a concentrated volley at the shield generator. It overloaded with a shower of sparks, leaving them exposed. Corvin charged forward, drawing fire away from Elias and Jalira. A disruptor blast caught him full in the chest, sending him crashing against the wall. Jalira screamed, a sound of pure rage that echoed through the corridor. Her blades became a violet blur as she launched herself at the remaining guards. Elias forced himself forward despite his wounds, blue plasma sword joining her assault. In seconds, it was over. The guards lay incapacitated or dead. Only Kelt remained, backing away in terror as Jalira advanced on him, blades raised for a killing stroke. "Jalira, wait," Elias called, moving to Corvin's side. The Catherine veteran was alive but badly injured, breathing shallow and ragged. Jalira hesitated, blades still poised. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't end him now." "Because you're better than him," Elias said simply. "Better than what they tried to make you." For a moment, it seemed she wouldn't listen. The hatred in her eyes burned hot enough to melt steel. Hatred for Kelt, for the hegemony, for her uncle's betrayal. Then, slowly, she lowered her blades. "You're right," she said, voice steady despite the emotion roiling within her. "I'm not a killer. Not like him." Kelt, sensing reprieve, straightened his posture. "A wise decision, Princess. Perhaps we can—" Jalira's blade flashed once. Not to kill, but to wound. The ambassador collapsed, clutching his leg where the plasma had seared through muscle and bone. "But I'm not merciful either," she told him coldly. "Not anymore." They carried Corvin to the ship, sealing the bay doors behind them. As Jalira took the pilot's seat, Elias attended to their wounded comrade, applying emergency medical treatments from the ship's supplies. "Will he make it?" Jalira asked, as the ship lifted off, accelerating away from the hegemony flagship. "If we get him proper medical care soon," Elias confirmed. "He's tough." The flagship's weapon systems were powering up, targeting arrays locking onto their small vessel. But they had the advantage of surprise and speed. Before the massive warship could bring its full firepower to bear, Jalira had navigated them back into the nebula's protective embrace. "They'll pursue," she said, hands dancing across the controls as she plotted an evasive course. "Let them," Elias replied, moving to the co-pilot's seat once Corvin was stabilized. "We know these routes better than they do." For nearly an hour, they played a deadly game of hide-and-seek through the nebula, using its electromagnetic properties to mask their signature and confuse pursuit. Finally, they reached the far edge, coordinates already set for the jump to hyperspace. "Ready?" Jalira asked, finger poised above the jump initiator. Elias took her free hand in his. Together. The stars elongated around them as the ship leapt into hyperspace, leaving the hegemony fleet and Kirtal's betrayal behind. In the ship's small medical bay, they tended to their wounds, Elias's shoulder, Corvin's more serious internal injuries. Various minor cuts and burns accumulated during the fight. The cylinder they had risked everything to obtain sat on a counter, its supposed deadly contents now revealed as nothing more than an elaborate lure. "What happens now?" Elias asked, as Jalira finished bandaging his shoulder. "Haven's Reach won't be safe. The hegemony will target it in retaliation." "I know," Jalira said heavily. "I've already sent warning. They'll evacuate to the secondary location we prepared." "And us?" She was silent for a long moment, her crimson eyes distant with thought. Then her expression firmed with decision. "We go to Catherine Prime," she said. "It's time I claimed my birthright." Elias studied her face, seeing the determination that had replaced uncertainty. "You're sure?" "No," she admitted with a small smile. "But it's the right path. My uncle betrayed not just us, but all our people. The Catherines deserve better than a puppet sovereign who trades their future for his own security." "It won't be easy," Elias cautioned. "Kirtal has had years to consolidate power." "Nothing worth doing is ever easy," Jalira replied, echoing words Elias had once said to her during their training sessions. "But I won't be alone." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining with familiar strength. "No," he agreed softly. "You won't." Beyond the viewport, hyperspace streamed past in rivers of light, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But whatever awaited them, be it throne or exile, victory or defeat, they would face it, as they had faced everything since their reunion in the arena. Together. The struggle against the hegemony was far from over. The rebellion they had helped spark was still in its infancy, fragile and vulnerable. But a beginning had been made, a stand taken. And sometimes, that was enough. The Catherine Royal Palace rose like a fantasy of crystal and light from the lush forests of Catherine Prime. Its towering spires, connected by graceful arches that seemed to defy gravity, reflected the planet's emerald sun in countless rainbow fragments. Gardens cascaded down terrace levels, featuring flora from 100 worlds, all thriving in the planet's gentle climate. It was, Elias thought as their ship approached, both beautiful and formidable, much like the Catherine people themselves, much like Jalira. She stood beside him on the bridge, dressed not in combat gear, but in formal Catherine attire, a flowing garment of midnight blue, accented with silver that matched her hair. At her waist, however, her twin violet blades remained, a reminder that this princess was also a warrior. "Home," she said softly, the word carrying a complexity of emotion. "I never thought I'd see it again." 6 months had passed since their confrontation with Ambassador Kelt and their discovery of Sovereign Kirtal's betrayal. 6 months of building alliances, gathering support, and preparing for this moment. Haven's Reach had been evacuated as planned, its people scattered to friendly colonies throughout the fringe systems. Corvin had recovered from his injuries and now led a growing resistance movement in the outer colonies. Z continued his invaluable work infiltrating hegemony communications. The rebellion, rather than being crushed, had grown stronger, more organized, and now, at last, they were ready to challenge Kirtal directly. "The people are with you," Elias reminded her, seeing the tension in her posture. "Your uncle's collaboration with the hegemony has cost them dearly." It was true. Once Jalira had revealed Kirtal's role in the plot to eliminate her, evidence secured from Kelt himself during a daring raid on a hegemony prison transport. Popular support had swung dramatically in her favor. The Catherine people, proud and independent by nature, resented their sovereign's subservience to the hegemony. "The people, yes," Jalira agreed. "But the royal guard remains loyal to the throne, whoever sits upon it, and Kirtal will not relinquish power willingly." Their ship was hailed as they entered Catharan airspace. Jalira responded personally, using the royal authentication codes provided by her supporters within the palace. After a tense moment, they were granted permission to land in the palace's diplomatic courtyard. "This could still be a trap," Elias warned as they prepared to disembark. Jalira's smile was grim. "Of course it's a trap, but sometimes the only way past a trap is through it." The diplomatic courtyard was eerily empty when they landed. No honor guard, no welcoming committee, not even the usual complement of servants. Only a single figure awaited them at the base of the ship's ramp, a tall, elegant Catherine female whose silver hair, shot through with blue, was elaborately braided in the style of royal advisors. "Mentor Lyra," Jalira greeted her, genuine warmth in her voice. "It is good to see you again." The older Catherine bowed deeply. "Princess, the ancestors smile upon your return." Her crimson eyes, faded somewhat with age, shifted to Elias. "And this is your human consort?" "This is Elias," Jalira confirmed. "My partner in all things." Lyra studied him with undisguised curiosity. "The mercenary who became gladiator, who became revolutionary. Your reputation precedes you." "I hope it's a good one," Elias replied with a small smile. "That depends entirely on one's perspective." Lyra turned back to Jalira, her expression grave. You should know that your uncle has called an emergency session of the High Council. He means to formally denounce you as a traitor to the Catherine people." "When?" Jalira asked sharply. "It begins in 1 hour. All noble houses have been summoned." Jalira and Elias exchanged glances. This was moving faster than they had anticipated. They had hoped for time to gather support, to speak with key allies before confronting Kirtal directly. "Then we must be present," Jalira decided. "Kirtal will not condemn me in absentia." "It is dangerous," Lyra cautioned. "The royal guard has been doubled. Access to the Grand Chamber is tightly controlled." "Can you get us in?" Elias asked. Lyra's whiskers twitched with amusement. "I have been mentor to the royal family for 4 generations. There is very little that happens in this palace without my knowledge, including the existence of passages not found on any official schematic." With Lyra guiding them, they moved through the palace via hidden corridors and secret chambers, the forgotten arteries of the ancient structure. Elias marveled at the craftsmanship around them. Even in these hidden spaces, intricate carvings decorated walls that no one was meant to see. Perfect symmetry existed in rooms never intended for display. As they walked, Lyra briefed them on the political situation. "Kirtal's position has weakened considerably since your evidence against him became public," she explained. 3 of the 7 noble houses have openly declared for you. 2 remain loyal to your uncle. The remaining 2 claim neutrality, but they will side with whoever appears strongest when the dust settles. "And the common people?" Jalira asked. "Firmly in your favor, Princess. They have not forgotten your father's reign, or the prosperity they enjoyed before the hegemony's influence grew." They reached a narrow staircase that spiraled upward into darkness. Lyra produced a small illumination device, casting enough light for them to see the worn steps. "This will take us directly to the observation gallery above the Grand Chamber," she said. "From there, you can assess the situation before making your entrance." The staircase seemed endless, winding higher and higher through the heart of the palace. Elias noted that Jalira's breathing remained steady despite the climb, a testament to her physical conditioning. The frightened child he had rescued 7 years ago had grown into a woman of remarkable strength, both physical and mental. Finally, they reached a small landing with a concealed door. Lyra pressed her palm to what appeared to be solid wall, and a section slid silently aside, revealing a narrow balcony overlooking an enormous chamber below. The Grand Chamber was a marvel of Catherine architecture, a vast circular space with a domed ceiling that depicted the night sky in precious gems. Tiered seating surrounded a central floor where a single crystalline throne sat upon a raised dais. The seats were filled with Catherine nobility, their elaborate dress and jewelry creating a kaleidoscope of color. Upon the throne sat Sovereign Kirtal, resplendent in ceremonial armor of silver and blue. His expression was grave as he addressed the assembled nobles, his voice carrying clearly to their hidden observation point. "The threat to our very way of life," he was saying. "These acts of rebellion against the hegemony endanger the peace and prosperity we have worked so hard to maintain." Murmurs ran through the assembly, not all of them supportive. "Prosperity for whom?" called out one noble, rising from her seat. "The mining concessions you granted the hegemony have devastated our southern continent. Our people suffer while you accumulate personal wealth." Kirtal's ears flattened against his skull in anger. "Lady Vex, your house walks a dangerous line. The agreements with the hegemony are necessary for our security." "Our security? Or your position?" challenged another noble. "We have become vassals under your rule, sovereign. The Catherine people were not meant to bow to anyone." The chamber erupted in competing voices, some supporting Kirtal, others condemning him. Jalira watched intently, cataloging allies and enemies by their responses. "The moment approaches," Lyra whispered, "when he formally names you traitor. I will reveal the entrance to the chamber floor. You must time your appearance perfectly." Jalira nodded, tension radiating from her body. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent reminder of his presence, his support. Below, Kirtal raised his hands for silence. Gradually, the chamber quieted. "I have not called this council to debate policy," he announced, voice hardening. "I have called you to witness a formal proclamation. It is with great regret that I must name my niece, Princess Jalira, a traitor to the Catherine people and an enemy of the throne. Her actions against the hegemony have placed our world in grave danger. Therefore, I hereby strip her of all royal titles and rights of succession." "That is not your decision to make, Uncle." Jalira's voice rang out across the chamber, silencing the murmurs that had followed Kirtal's proclamation. All eyes turned toward the main entrance, but she was not there. Instead, guided by Lyra, Jalira and Elias had emerged from a hidden door directly behind the throne itself. They stood on the dais, just steps from Kirtal, who whirled in shock at the sound of his niece's voice. "You!" he hissed, recovering quickly. "Guards, seize the traitors!" The royal guard moved forward, weapon crystals glowing as they activated. But they hesitated when several nobles rose from their seats, their own house guards stepping into defensive positions. "The princess will be heard," declared Lady Vex, the noble who had spoken earlier. "By ancient right, any member of royal blood may address the full council before judgment is passed." Other voices joined hers, demanding Jalira be allowed to speak. Kirtal's face contorted with barely suppressed rage, but he was bound by tradition. To deny Jalira's right to address the council would undermine his own legitimacy. "Speak then," he said coldly, "before you are taken into custody to await formal trial." Jalira stepped forward, her midnight blue garments flowing around her like liquid shadow. The crystalline floor amplified her voice as she addressed the assembled nobles. "Honored houses of Catherine Prime, I stand before you not as a traitor, but as the rightful heir to the throne my father once held, with dignity and wisdom." Her crimson eyes swept the chamber, making contact with key allies. "I have returned to reclaim that birthright, and to free our people from hegemony control." "Lies and sedition," Kirtal interjected. "The hegemony is our ally and protector." "Is that why you conspired with Ambassador Kelt to have me assassinated?" Jalira challenged, turning to face her uncle directly. "Is that why you fabricated evidence of a biological weapon to lure me into a trap?" Gasps and exclamations echoed through the chamber. This accusation was new to many present. "Absurd," Kirtal dismissed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You have no proof of such outlandish claims." "But I do," came a new voice from the chamber entrance. All eyes turned to see Ambassador Kelt himself, leaning heavily on a cane, the legacy of Jalira's plasma blade. Behind him stood Corvin and a contingent of Catherine resistance fighters. "What is the meaning of this?" Kirtal demanded, genuine confusion replacing calculation. Kelt limped forward, his pale blue features set in lines of grim determination. "Sovereign Kirtal conspired with me to eliminate Princess Jalira. That much is true." His eyes met Jalira's across the chamber. "What the princess doesn't know is that I have since reconsidered my loyalties." "Ambassador Kelt was most cooperative after his capture," Corvin added, stepping forward. "Especially when presented with evidence of how the hegemony planned to dispose of him once he was no longer useful." Understanding dawned on Elias. The raid on the prison transport, it hadn't just been to secure evidence. They had recruited Kelt himself to their cause. Kirtal's composure finally shattered. "This is a coordinated deception. The princess and her human consort are manipulating you all." "We have recordings." "Sovereign," Kelt said, producing a data crystal. "Your own words, planning my operation against your niece. Shall I play them for the council?" The chamber had grown deathly quiet, all eyes moving between Jalira, Kelt, and Kirtal. The sovereign's ears were fully flattened now, his fur bristling with rage or fear. "Even if these accusations were true," he snarled, "my actions were for the protection of our people. The hegemony's might is irresistible. Better to accommodate them than be crushed beneath their heel." "Is that the legacy you wish for the Catherine people?" Jalira asked, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "To live as vassals, surrendering our resources, our autonomy, our pride? My father would never have accepted such terms." "Your father was a fool," Kirtal shouted, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "His defiance would have seen our world bombarded into dust. I saved us." The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. Several nobles rose to their feet in outrage. "You speak of my brother, the rightful sovereign, as a fool?" one elderly Catherine demanded, his ornate robes marking him as head of one of the oldest houses. "The same brother whose death came so conveniently as hegemony pressure mounted?" Kirtal's eyes widened, realizing too late the implication of his words. I didn't." "Did you kill my father, uncle?" Jalira asked quietly, the question slicing through the chamber like a blade. The sovereign's silence was answer enough. What happened next unfolded with the inevitability of an avalanche. The noble houses that had been neutral declared for Jalira. Those that had supported Kirtal withdrew that support, unwilling to be associated with a kinslayer. The royal guard, sworn to the throne rather than any individual, stepped away from Kirtal and knelt before Jalira. In the space of moments, 7 years of usurpation ended. Kirtal, stripped of support and dignity, was taken into custody to await justice. The succession crisis that had simmered beneath the surface of Catharan politics was resolved in a single tumultuous council session. Later that evening, in a private chamber away from the continuing deliberations of the noble houses, Jalira stood at a window overlooking the capital city. Lights twinkled in the gathering darkness, each one representing lives that were now, at least in part, her responsibility. "Having second thoughts?" Elias asked, joining her at the window. She turned to him, a small smile playing at her lips. "Third and fourth thoughts, actually. The throne was never my ambition. But it is your duty," he said gently. "And you've never shied from duty, even when it would have been easier." "No," she agreed. "Though I wonder if I'm truly prepared for this. Leading a rebellion is one thing, leading a people." "You won't be alone," Elias reminded her, echoing her own words from months before. He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "Unless you want to be." She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean that your world has traditions, expectations. A human consort to the sovereign might not be what your people need right now." Jalira's expression hardened. "My people need a leader who will stand against the hegemony, who will reclaim our independence and dignity. Who I choose to love is my own affair." "Even if it complicates your political position?" "Especially then." She stepped closer, placing a hand against his cheek. "The Catherine throne has been occupied by cowards and compromisers for too long. It's time for someone who isn't afraid to break with tradition when necessary." Elias smiled, covering her hand with his own. "Then I stand with you, Sovereign Jalira, for as long as you'll have me." "That," she said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him, "might be a very long time indeed." The formal coronation took place 3 days later, in the Grand Chamber, now filled with not just nobility, but representatives from every sector of Catharan society. Jalira knelt before the ancient crystal that had crowned sovereigns for 1,000 years. The crown itself was simple by royal standards, a circlet of platinum inlaid with gems that matched the colors of Catherine Prime's skies at dawn. But its weight, Jalira knew, went far beyond the physical. As the mentor, Lyra placed the crown upon her silver hair. Jalira felt the enormity of the moment. This was not just her reclamation of birthright, but a turning point for her people, Under her rule, the Catherine worlds would chart a new course, one of independence, strength, and principled resistance to tyranny. She rose to her feet, turning to face the assembled crowd. By tradition, the newly crowned sovereign spoke first to the noble houses, acknowledging their support and pledging to uphold their ancient privileges. But Jalira was not a traditional sovereign. Instead, she descended from the dais, moving into the center of the chamber where common citizens stood. A murmur of surprise ran through the noble tiers, but she ignored it, focusing instead on the faces of her people: miners, farmers, craftspeople, all watching with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "The strength of the Catherine throne," she said, her voice carrying clearly, "has never rested in crowns or councils, but in the will of our people. It is to you I make my first pledge as sovereign, that your needs, your safety, your prosperity will guide every decision of my reign." The commoners' section erupted in cheers, soon joined by most of the noble houses. Even those who found her approach unorthodox could not deny the power of the moment. From his position near the dais, Elias watched with pride. Jalira had transformed once again, from rescued child to vengeful gladiator, to resistance leader, and now to sovereign. Yet through each metamorphosis, her essential core remained: the courage, the determination, the capacity for both righteous anger and profound compassion that had drawn him to her. The formal ceremonies continued through the day and into the evening. Oaths of fealty from the noble houses, presentations from foreign dignitaries, notably absent any hegemony representatives, ritual blessings from Catherine's spiritual leaders. Finally, as the twin moons of Catherine Prime rose in the night sky, Jalira and Elias found a moment of solitude on the palace's highest balcony. Below them, the capital city celebrated with music, light displays, and spontaneous gatherings in public squares. "Your people seem pleased with their new sovereign," Elias observed, slipping an arm around her waist. "For now," Jalira said pragmatically. "The real test will come when the hegemony responds to our Declaration of Independence." The declaration had been her first official act as sovereign, a formal repudiation of all agreements signed under Kirtal's rule, and an assertion of Catherine autonomy. It was a bold move, perhaps even a dangerous one, but she had been unwilling to begin her reign with compromise. "They'll respond with force," Elias predicted. "It's the only language the hegemony truly understands." "I know." Jalira leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his presence. "Which is why we won't stand alone. The rebellion you and I helped spark has spread to a dozen worlds. Corvin reports new allies joining every day. And Ambassador Kelt's defection has given us invaluable intelligence on hegemony weaknesses," Elias added. "It won't be easy," Jalira acknowledged. "We may face years of struggle before true freedom is secured. But for the first time since my father's death, I believe it's possible." Below, the celebrations reached a crescendo as a spectacular light show illuminated the night sky. The Catherine constellations recreated through technology, shining with defiant brightness. "What happens now?" Elias asked, echoing the question he had posed so many times throughout their journey together. Jalira smiled, turning in his arms to face him. The crown had been set aside for the evening, leaving her simply as the woman he loved rather than the sovereign of worlds. "Now," she said, "we continue what we began in that arena on Karis Prime. We fight, we build, we create something worth protecting." Her crimson eyes held his, full of determination and love in equal measure. Together, in the years that followed, the name of Sovereign Jalira and her human consort, Elias, became legend across the galaxy. Their love story, from rescue to rivalry to revolution, inspired countless tales. But more than that, their defiance of the hegemony ignited a flame of rebellion that could not be extinguished. The battles were long and often bitter. The hegemony, as predicted, responded to Catharan independence with military force, but prepared by Jalira's leadership and Elias's tactical expertise, the Catharan defense forces held firm. Allied worlds joined their cause, one by one breaking free of hegemony control. On Haven's Reach, now a thriving colony rather than a precarious settlement, a monument was erected. 2 plasma swords crossed above a simple inscription that became the rallying cry of the rebellion. We're free. Not just words, but a promise. A reality being forged, one world, one battle, one day at a time. A legacy that began when a mercenary saved a child from slavers, continued when their swords clashed in a Deathworld arena, and extended far beyond either of them into a future where freedom was not just possible, but inevitable. The orphan princess and the mercenary who had saved her, then lost her, then found her again. Their story, like the rebellion they had sparked, was just beginning. But it was already changing the galaxy, one act of courage at a time.